From the thorn scrubland she emerged like a wounded creature, bare feet torn and bloodied, no garments save two broad leaves clutched against her chest with quaking hands. Her knees were scraped raw from crawling. Grime masked her features. Purple welts marked her ribs, arms, and legs. Her back bore strips of peeling sunburn. She appeared no more than 20 years old and utterly shattered. In his 58 years, Silas Reeve had witnessed countless horrors, battlefields, disease, women weeping for men who'd never return home. Yet nothing had prepared him for the sight of this girl at his ranch's border, stumbling through the wire fence as though death itself had rejected her. The water pail slipped from his grasp, striking the parched Texas earth with a dull impact. The girl jerked backward, lifting one trembling palm in warning. "Stay back," she rasped, voice fractured but fierce. "I'll cry out." "I swear it. I'll end you if necessary." Her words carried both defiance and absolute terror. Silas remained motionless, slowly raising both palms and retreating a step. "Easy now," he murmured. "No harm will come to you here." The girl studied him not as a man but as a hunter, a danger, a nightmare she'd barely outrun. Then her strength failed her. She collapsed into the dust, a heap of injuries and silence, those leaves still pressed to her chest, her frame convulsing so violently her teeth rattled. Silas didn't rush forward. Instead, he walked to his porch, removed his jacket, and placed it on the ground several feet away. Then he settled down, not too near, not too distant. The prairie wind stirred, carrying scents of withered grass and buried secrets. She continued watching him with wild eyes, poised to flee or fight or perish. He spoke nothing, and neither did she. Two souls, one homestead, 100 unspoken tales between them. Yet only one question demanded answering. Who was this girl, and from what nightmare had she just escaped? The girl remained silent that first night, curled beneath the porch overhang, wrapped in that weathered coat like it was her sole anchor to existence. Silas didn't probe. He left water, some food, a coverlet that had once belonged to his wife. Then he retired to bed, sleeping with vigilant awareness. Come morning, she was still there, still trembling, still gripping those cursed leaves as though her survival depended on them. "You have a name?" he inquired from a safe distance. She paused, then in a voice thin as spider's silk floating across the yard whispered, "Evelyn." He acknowledged with a nod, asking nothing more. She wasn't prepared. The following days crawled by slowly. Evelyn refused to enter the cabin, wouldn't eat unless he withdrew from the table first, couldn't sleep without the lamp burning through the night. She startled at every noise, each crow's call, every wooden creak. Silas observed it all. He'd witnessed battle trauma before, but this was different. This wasn't a woman who'd survived warfare. This was a woman who'd survived mankind. On the third day, she finally crossed the threshold, barely, just beyond the doorway. She stood staring at the hearth, then her gaze fixed on something hanging from the wall, a leather restraint aged and cracked, still bearing dark stains in its creases. Her complexion turned ashen. She retreated as though confronted by a specter. "You're one of them," she breathed. "You kept women here like me." Silas felt the crushing weight of her words. He regarded that restraint as though it had never belonged in his home, despite having placed it there himself. "I used to guard transport wagons," he said. "They never told us the cargo. We were paid for silence, and I kept quiet. For far too long." Evelyn's hands began shaking anew. Her breathing became ragged, as though panic was reawakening in her bones. She didn't scream or run, but the chasm between them had never seemed wider. That night, she didn't rest under the porch. She slept in the barn on straw like a stray animal that couldn't trust the offered food. Silas sat alone on the porch, rotating a tin cup in his hands, contemplating every instance he'd looked away when he should have looked closer. He thought the worst had passed. He was mistaken, because the next visitor to the ranch wasn't seeking forgiveness. He was hunting the girl. The knock came just before dusk. Not forceful, not courteous either, more like a warning. Silas rose from his chair, hand instinctively finding the revolver at his hip. He hadn't touched that weapon in years, yet tonight, he sensed what was coming. At the gate stood a man with unforgettable features, long coat, dusty boots, and a scar carved down his left jaw like divine punishment. Evelyn spotted him through the window. She froze, the spoon clattering from her grip onto the wooden floor. "That's him," she whispered. "The one who locked me away." Silas stepped from the porch. "Evening, Jude," he said. The man's grin held no warmth. "Silas Reeves still drawing breath, I see. You here for her?" "I'm here for what belongs to Mr. Clay." The wind died. Even the cicadas fell silent. Silas didn't blink. "You tell Ben Clay that Silas Reeve has buried enough men for one lifetime. He doesn't want me digging again." Jude's smirk faltered. The name still carried power. Silas saw it, that flicker of uncertainty in the man's eyes, as though this old rancher might not be as harmless as he appeared. Jude tipped his hat, didn't press, didn't fight. He turned his horse and departed without another word. Evelyn remained huddled in the kitchen corner for hours. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't move, barely breathed audibly. Later that night, Silas returned to the porch. Same tin cup, same thoughts gnawing at him. That knock hadn't been a threat. It was reconnaissance. Now Clay knew her location. What followed wouldn't be a warning. It would be a tempest. They returned 3 days later. No knocking, no conversation, just hoofbeats and the stench of dark history rolling in with the dust. 3 men again, familiar faces. Only this time they weren't here to negotiate. They were here to claim. Evelyn saw them from the barn loft. She dropped the brush she'd been using to groom the mare and retreated into the hay as though it could consume her entirely. Silas met them halfway up the path. He carried no weapon, didn't need one. "You have our answer?" The scarred man asked. Same voice that once commanded in darkness. The one that still made Evelyn's spine stiffen. Silas didn't respond immediately. Instead, he placed a small wooden container on a weathered fence post, opening it slowly as though it might strike. Inside lay an old U.S. Marshal's badge, broken cleanly in half, and a folded document. The scarred man peered inside, eyes narrowing as he read the faded ink. "That's Clay's signature," he muttered. "A pardon?" Silas nodded. "Signed in '73, meant to keep me breathing if things went badly. And you're surrendering it?" the man asked, tone mixing admiration with suspicion. "I'm bartering it," Silas said. "For the girl and for peace. He gets the badge, he gets my silence, but he never gets her." The man traced the broken star's edge with his thumb, then studied Silas intently before finally saying, "We'll relay the message." "No guarantees. Just one will suffice," Silas replied. "Tell him I still know where he buried them." That wasn't a bluff. They departed without further words. Evelyn didn't descend from the loft until sunset. She moved carefully, as though the earth might still crack beneath her feet. "You sacrificed that for me?" she asked, voice quiet but no longer fearful, just curious. Silas didn't look at her, just sat on the porch as always, gazing beyond the fence line, beyond the trees, perhaps watching his past finally walk away. But it hadn't, not truly, because while the badge might be gone, what it represented remained buried somewhere deep in the soil. Days passed like wind through parched grass, soft, unnoticed, yet constantly moving. Evelyn began leaving the barn earlier. Sometimes she even reached the coffee pot before Silas. She still startled at sudden sounds, still recoiled when shadows moved too quickly. But she laughed once, just briefly, when the rooster slipped from the fence rail and landed flat on his face. Silas heard it, said nothing, just smiled into his coffee. They never discussed the badge, the container, or the men who'd ridden away. Some things were better left under the porch like old tools, still there, but not needed daily. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the ridge, Evelyn sat beside him on the porch, close enough for her shoulder to touch his arm. "You never demanded anything," she said. "Not once. Why?" Silas stared across the field, same as always. "You've been taken from enough," he said. "Didn't seem right taking more." Silence again, but the kind that no longer caused pain. Later that night, she left something by his door. Nothing elaborate, just a folded cloth with her name embroidered in the corner. That was the closest thing to love either of them knew how to express. Can a man like Silas, who once ignored cruelty, who served the wrong cause for too long, can he truly find love? Can saving one life ever cleanse the sin of remaining silent while others suffered? And if not, what purpose does forgiveness serve? Perhaps this wasn't about redemption. Perhaps it was simply about doing right one final time before the end. The West was never about gunfighters and dramatic showdowns from movies. It was about people, broken, courageous, trying to outrun their past long enough to find a little peace. And sometimes, if the wind's just right, they do.